The rain pounded the streets of suburban Ohio like it was trying to drown the world. Ethan Carter, 16 and shivering, stood under a flickering street lamp, clutching a tattered backpack as his stepmother's words echoed in his skull. No son of mine will be a sinner. Cast out for loving who he loved, he was homeless, heartbroken, and utterly alone. But Ethan wasn't one to break. Even as the cold seeped into his bones, a fire burned in his chest, a stubborn spark of defiance. He'd survive this. He had to. The world might have turned its back, but he'd carve his own path, no matter how brutal the journey. The first night was the hardest. Ethan wandered the streets of his small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. His father had died when he was 10, leaving him with Linda, his stepmother, who'd never hidden her disdain for him. When he'd come out to her, nervously confessing his feelings for a boy at school, her face had twisted into something unrecognizable. "Get out," she'd spat, shoving him toward the door. "You're no longer welcome here." He'd pleaded, but her heart was stone. Now, with nowhere to go, he ducked into an alley behind a diner, curling up under a cardboard box to shield himself from the rain. Morning brought no mercy. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but Ethan refused to beg. He rummaged through his backpack, finding a crumpled $5 bill, his last bit of cash. At the diner, he ordered a coffee and a single pancake, savoring each bite like it was his last. The waitress, a kind-eyed woman named Marla, noticed his soaked clothes and hollow cheeks. "You okay, kid?" she asked, her voice soft but probing. Ethan forced a smile, just passing through. He couldn't afford pity, not yet. But Marla slid an extra pancake onto his plate when she thought he wasn't looking. It was the first kindness he'd felt in days, and it nearly broke him. He spent the next week bouncing between shelters and park benches, learning the unspoken rules of survival. Don't make eye contact. Keep your bag close. Trust no one. But Ethan's mind wasn't on just surviving. He was dreaming. He'd always loved music, the way a song could capture pain and hope in a single chord. Back home, he'd written lyrics in secret, scribbling them in a notebook Linda had once thrown in the trash. Now that notebook was his lifeline, tucked safely in his bag. One evening, at a shelter in Cleveland, he met Jamal, a wiry volunteer with a quick laugh and a guitar slung over his shoulder. Jamal caught Ethan humming a melody and raised an eyebrow. "You got a voice to go with that tune?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. Singing felt too raw, too vulnerable. But something in Jamal's easy grin made him trust. He sang a few lines from one of his own songs, his voice shaky but clear, carrying the weight of his pain. The room went quiet. Jamal whistled low. "Kid, you've got it. You ever think about performing?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "Perform where? I'm sleeping on the street." Jamal didn't push, but he handed Ethan a flyer for an open mic night at a local cafe. "Start small. You got something to say. Let the world hear it." That flyer became Ethan's obsession. He spent days practicing, humming melodies under his breath, refining lyrics in his head. The night of the open mic, he stood in the cafe's dim light, heart pounding. The crowd was small, maybe 20 people, but to Ethan, it felt like a stadium. He sang about loss, about fighting to be seen, about loving fiercely despite the world's cruelty. His voice cracked on the high notes, but it carried raw, unshakable truth. When he finished, the room erupted. Strangers clapped, some with tears in their eyes. A man in a leather jacket approached him afterward, introducing himself as Nate, a local producer. "You've got talent, kid," Nate said, handing him a business card. "Let's talk." Ethan's heart raced. Was this his chance? He didn't know Nate, didn't know if he could trust him, but he'd been thrown out, abandoned, and left to rot. He had nothing to lose. For the next year, Ethan worked with Nate, recording demos in a cramped studio. It wasn't glamorous. Nate's studio was a garage with secondhand equipment, but Ethan poured his soul into every song. He wrote about his stepmother's betrayal, his father's absence, the boy he'd loved but never had the chance to tell. Each lyric was a piece of his heart, laid bare for the world. Nate believed in him, But the industry was brutal. Rejections piled up. Labels called his music too niche, his story too controversial. Ethan was gay, unapologetically so, and he refused to hide it. That scared people. But Nate kept pushing, sending demos to anyone who'd listen. One day, a small indie label in New York took a chance. They offered Ethan a contract, not a big one, but enough to get him off the streets. Ethan moved to New York at 17, crashing on Nate's cousin's couch. The city was overwhelming, a chaotic pulse of noise and ambition. But it was also freedom. For the first time, Ethan could be himself without fear. He met others like him, queer kids chasing dreams, defying a world that tried to break them. He felt like he belonged. His first single, Outcast, dropped a year later. It was raw, angry, and achingly honest, an anthem for anyone who'd ever been told they weren't enough. It didn't chart, but it spread like wildfire online. People shared it, tweeted it, made TikTok videos with it. Ethan's voice, once confined to alleyways and shelters, was now reaching thousands. And then he met Lucas. It was at a dive bar in Brooklyn, where Ethan was performing for a crowd of 50. Lucas was in the back, nursing a beer, his blue eyes catching the stage lights. He was tall, with messy blonde hair and a quiet intensity that made Ethan's heart skip. After the set, Lucas approached, nervous but bold. "Your music," he said, voice low, "it's like you're singing my life." They talked until the bar closed, swapping stories of small-town upbringings and the weight of being different. Lucas was an artist, painting vibrant murals that told stories of love and rebellion. He'd grown up in rural Pennsylvania, where he'd hidden who he was until he escaped to New York. Like Ethan, he knew what it meant to fight for his truth. Their connection was instant, electric. They spent nights wandering the city, sharing dreams and fears. Lucas showed Ethan his paintings. Ethan played Lucas his unfinished songs. For the first time, Ethan felt seen, not just as a singer, but as himself. Their first kiss, under a streetlight in the East Village, felt like the start of something bigger than either of them. But Ethan's past wasn't done with him. One night, as he scrolled through Twitter, he saw a post from his hometown. A photo of Linda, his stepmother, at a church event, smiling like she hadn't ruined his life. Rage surged through him. He wanted her to know he'd survived, that he was thriving despite her. But he wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. His career was gaining momentum. Outkast caught the attention of a major label, and soon Ethan was in a real studio, recording an album. Lucas was by his side, his steady presence grounding Ethan through the chaos. They moved in together, a tiny apartment in Queens, their walls covered with Lucas's art and Ethan's lyrics scribbled on napkins. But the industry was a beast. Labels wanted to sanitize Ethan's image, tone down his queerness to appeal to a wider audience. Ethan refused. "I'm not hiding who I am," he told his manager. Not again. It was a risk, but it paid off. His authenticity resonated. Fans loved him for it. By 20, Ethan Carter was a rising star, his music climbing charts, his face on billboards. And then, one night, everything changed. Ethan's album, Unbroken, dropped to critical acclaim. It was a raw, soul-bearing collection of songs that wove his pain and resilience into every note. The lead single, Fire in My Bones, became an anthem for the marginalized, its chorus echoing in protests and pride parades. Ethan, now 21, was no longer the scared kid under a street lamp. He was a voice, a symbol, a beacon for those who'd been cast out like he had. But fame was a double-edged sword. The spotlight brought adoration, but also scrutiny. Paparazzi hounded him and Lucas, snapping photos of them holding hands, turning their love into tabloid fodder. Ethan didn't care. He'd spent too long hiding to care about strangers' opinions. Lucas, though, struggled with the attention. "I just want us to be us," he'd say, his voice tight after dodging cameras. Ethan would pull him close, promising they'd weather it together. Their relationship deepened despite the chaos. Lucas's art was gaining traction too, his murals popping up on buildings across New York. They were a power couple in the making, their love a quiet rebellion against a world that often refused to accept them. Ethan wrote songs for Lucas, tender ballads that never made it to the radio, but lived in their late-night moments, when it was just them and a guitar. One evening, Ethan got a call from his manager. "You're invited to perform at the Grammys," she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "They want Fire in My Bones for the main stage." Ethan froze, the phone trembling in his hand. The Grammys. The pinnacle. He'd dreamed of this since he was a kid, sneaking listens to his dad's old records. Lucas hooped when Ethan told him, lifting him off the ground in a bear hug. "You're gonna kill it," he said, his grin wide. But there was a flicker of worry in his eyes. The bigger Ethan got, the more their lives were exposed. Lucas loved him fiercely, but Ethan could sense the strain. The months leading to the Grammys were a whirlwind. Rehearsals, interviews, photo shoots, Ethan barely slept. He and Lucas stole moments when they could, sneaking away to their favorite diner or curling up on their couch. One night, as they lay tangled in bed, Lucas traced circles on Ethan's chest. "You ever think about going back?" he asked. "To Ohio. To face her." Ethan tensed. Linda. He hadn't spoken her name in years, but she haunted him. "Why would I?" he said, his voice sharp. "She threw me out. She doesn't get to know me now." Lucas nodded, but his eyes held something unspoken. Sometimes facing the past makes you free. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't want to think about Linda, about the woman who'd called him a mistake. He wanted to focus on the present, on Lucas, on music, on the life he'd built from nothing. The Grammy performance was electric. Ethan took the stage in a black leather jacket, his voice soaring over a sea of lights. The crowd roared, and for those 4 minutes, he felt invincible. Backstage, Lucas was waiting, pulling him into a kiss that drowned out the world. "I'm so proud of you," Lucas whispered, and Ethan's heart swelled. But the high didn't last. A week later, Ethan got an email that stopped him cold. It was from a cousin in Ohio, one of the few family members who'd checked on him after he was kicked out. "Linda's sick," the email read. "Cancer. She's been asking about you." Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. Asking about him? After what she'd done. He showed Lucas, expecting him to be as angry as he was. But Lucas's face softened. "Maybe you should go," he said. "Not for her. For you." "No way," Ethan snapped. "She doesn't deserve my time." Lucas didn't push, but the idea lingered, a splinter in Ethan's mind. He threw himself into his music, writing new songs, each one sharper, angrier. His fans loved the edge, but Lucas noticed the toll. "You're carrying her with you," he said one night, his voice gentle but firm. "All that anger, it's heavy." Ethan wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Lucas was right. Linda's rejection was a shadow, following him even in his brightest moments. He hated her, but he hated how much power she still had over him. He decided to go back, not to forgive, but to confront. He needed to look Linda in the eye and show her he'd won. Lucas offered to come, but Ethan shook his head. "This is something I have to do alone." The flight to Ohio was surreal. Ethan, now a celebrity, wore a baseball cap and sunglasses to avoid recognition. His hometown hadn't changed. Same sleepy streets, same judgmental stares. He drove to Linda's house, his heart pounding. The place looked smaller, shabbier than he remembered. He knocked, half expecting no one to answer. Linda opened the door. She looked frail, her once sharp features softened by illness. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she just stared. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't smile. "I heard you were asking about me." She stepped aside, letting him in. The house smelled of antiseptic and regret. They sat in the living room, silence stretching between them. Finally, Linda spoke. "I saw you on TV. The Grammys. I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Ethan's voice was cold. "That I'd survive? That I'd make something of myself without you." Her hand shook. "I was wrong, Ethan. I was so wrong." He wanted to feel triumph. but all he felt was emptiness. Her apology didn't erase the nights he'd spent hungry, alone, terrified. "You threw me out," he said, his voice breaking. "I was 16. I could have died." Tears streamed down her face. "I thought I was doing right by God. I was wrong. I've regretted it every day." Ethan stood, his chest tight. He'd come to gloat, to show her his success. But seeing her like this, broken, human, didn't feel like victory. "I didn't come here for you," he said. "I came to let you go." He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. In the car, he cried for the first time in years. Not for Linda, but for the kid he'd been, the one who deserved better. Back in New York, Lucas was waiting. Ethan fell into his arms, exhausted but lighter. "You were right," he whispered. "I needed that." Lucas kissed his forehead. "You're free now." Ethan's confrontation with Linda didn't erase the past, but it loosened its grip. He returned to New York with a clarity he hadn't felt before. His music took on a new depth, weaving hope into the pain. His second album, Reclaimed, was a love letter to resilience, to Lucas, to every kid who'd ever been told they didn't belong. It went platinum in months. But fame was a relentless machine. Ethan's schedule was packed. Tours, talk shows, charity events. He loved performing, loved connecting with fans who saw themselves in his lyrics. Yet the grind left little room for him and Lucas. Their stolen moments became rarer, their apartment more a crash pad than a home. Lucas was struggling too. His art was thriving. Galleries were clamoring for his work. But the spotlight on Ethan cast a shadow over him. Paparazzi didn't care about his murals. They wanted shots of Ethan Carter's boyfriend. Lucas never said it, but Ethan could see the strain in his tight smiles, the way he'd retreat to his sketchbook when the world felt too loud. One night, after a grueling tour, Ethan came home to find Lucas painting in their living room, his hands streaked with color. The mural was stunning, a vibrant cityscape with two figures at its heart, their hands entwined. Ethan's throat tightened. "Is that us?" he asked. Lucas nodded, not looking up. "It's how I see us. Unbreakable, even when it's hard." Ethan pulled him close, guilt washing over him. "I've been gone too much," he said. "I'm sorry." Lucas shook his head. "It's not just you. It's everything. The cameras, the headlines. I love you, Ethan, but I don't know if I'm built for this." The words hit like a punch. Ethan had fought so hard to get here, but was he losing the one person who mattered most? "We'll figure it out," he promised. Together. They tried. Ethan cut back on interviews, prioritized nights at home. Lucas opened up about his fears, about feeling like an accessory to Ethan's fame. They talked, fought, laughed, loved, determined to protect what they had. But the world kept pulling. Then came the call that changed everything. Ethan's manager pitched a world tour, a year-long, multi-continent beast that could cement his legacy. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, but it meant months away from Lucas. Ethan hesitated, torn between his dreams and his heart. Lucas made the choice for him. "You have to go," he said, his voice steady but his eyes wet. "This is who you are. I won't let you give it up for me." "I'm not losing you," Ethan said, gripping his hand. "You won't," Lucas promised. "I'll be here. Always." The tour was a triumph. Ethan played to sold-out arenas, his music reaching millions. Fans chanted his name in cities he'd never dreamed of visiting. But every night, he called Lucas, their conversations a lifeline across oceans. Lucas sent photos of his latest murals, each one a reminder of home. Ethan wrote songs on the road, pouring his longing into lyrics. Halfway through the tour, in London, Ethan got a text from his cousin. Linda had passed away. The news hit harder than he expected. He didn't grieve her, not exactly, but he grieved the family they could have been. He called Lucas, needing his voice. "I wish you were here," Ethan said, his voice thick. "I'm with you," Lucas replied. "Always." When the tour ended, Ethan returned to New York exhausted but whole. Lucas met him at the airport, and they clung to each other like they'd been apart for years. That night, in their apartment, Ethan proposed. No ring, no grand gesture, just them, sitting on the floor, surrounded by Lucas's paints and Ethan's notebooks. "Marry me," Ethan said. "I don't care about the world. I just want you." Lucas's smile was brighter than any spotlight. "Yes," he whispered, and they kissed until dawn. Planning a wedding while navigating fame was no small feat. Ethan and Lucas wanted something simple, intimate, a celebration of their love, not a media circus. They chose a quiet vineyard in upstate New York, surrounded by rolling hills and autumn leaves. No press, no cameras, just their closest friends and chosen family. The day was perfect. Ethan wore a tailored suit, his nerves buzzing as he stood under an arbor draped with wildflowers. Lucas walked down the aisle, his grin wide, his eyes locked on Ethan's. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to fight for each other, to choose love over fear. When they kissed, the small crowd cheered, and Ethan felt like he'd finally found home. Life after the wedding was a balancing act. Ethan's career was soaring. His third album was in the works, and he was headlining festivals. Lucas's art was in demand, his murals gracing cities from Miami to Seattle. They were a team, supporting each other's dreams while carving out time for themselves. But the past wasn't done with Ethan. One morning, while scrolling through emails, Ethan found one from a lawyer in Ohio. Lindiswell had named him as a beneficiary. He laughed bitterly, assuming it was a mistake. But curiosity got the better of him, and he flew back to Ohio one last time. The lawyer handed him a letter in Linda's handwriting. It was dated a month before her death. "Ethan," it read, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know I was proud of you, even if I never showed it. The house is yours. Do with it what you will." Enclosed was the deed to her home, the same one she'd kicked him out of. Ethan didn't know what to feel. Anger, still, but also something softer. He didn't want the house, didn't want her guilt. He drove to the property, expecting to feel nothing. Instead, memories flooded back, the good ones like his dad teaching him to ride a bike, and the bad like Linda's cold stare. He stood in the empty living room, the weight of it all pressing down. He called Lucas. "What do I do with this place?" he asked. "Make it mean something," Lucas said. "Something good." Ethan donated the house to a local charity that supported homeless queer youth. They turned it into a shelter, a safe haven for kids like him who'd been thrown out for being themselves. The day it opened, Ethan and Lucas attended the ribbon cutting, their hands clasped tightly. A teenage girl, one of the first residents, approached Ethan. "Your music saved me," she said, tears in her eyes. "Thank you." Ethan hugged her, his own eyes burning. This, he realized, was why he'd fought so hard. Not just for himself, but for every kid who needed to know they were enough. Back in New York, Ethan and Lucas settled into their life. They adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Cord, who followed them everywhere. Ethan's music evolved, blending his signature rawness with a newfound joy. Lucas's art became bolder, his murals telling stories of love and triumph. They were happy, not because life was perfect, but because they had each other. Years passed, and Ethan's star only rose. By 28, he was a global icon, his music a soundtrack for a generation. Lucas's art was in museums, his name synonymous with bold, unapologetic expression. They were a power couple, yes, but more than that, they were a testament to what love could endure. One evening, Ethan was invited to perform at a massive Pride event in Los Angeles. The crowd stretched as far as he could see, a sea of rainbow flags and hopeful faces. Lucas stood backstage, his presence a quiet anchor. Ethan took the stage, his guitar slung over his shoulder, and poured his heart into every note. He dedicated his set to Lucas, to the kids in shelters, to everyone fighting to be seen. After the show, a reporter approached him, asking about his journey. Ethan smiled, thinking of the boy he'd been, scared, alone, but unbroken. I was thrown out at 16 for being gay, he said, his voice steady. My stepmother thought she was erasing me. But I'm still here, louder than ever. The clip went viral. People shared it, wept over it, celebrated it. Ethan's story wasn't just his anymore. It was a beacon for millions. He and Lucas watched the response flood in, their phones buzzing with messages from fans, from kids who'd found courage in his words. A week later, Ethan got a package in the mail. It was from the shelter in Ohio, the one he'd created from Linda's house. Inside was a scrapbook filled with letters and photos from the kids who'd found safety there. Each note was a piece of hope, a reminder that his pain had built something beautiful. That night, Ethan and Lucas sat on their balcony, the New York skyline glittering below. Cord slept at their feet, and the air was warm with summer. Ethan leaned his head on Lucas's shoulder. We did okay, didn't we? He said. Lucas kissed his temple. We did better than okay. Their love had carried them through rejection, fame, and everything in between. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And as Ethan looked out at the city, he knew one thing for certain. No matter what the world threw at them, they'd face it together. The boy who'd been cast out had become a man who'd changed the world. And in Lucas's arms, he'd found the home he'd always longed for.